Select Committee, Rehman Chishti, is here with us. Thank you for coming in. I'm terribly sorry it's under these circumstances. You've obviously been following this story all morning.
Well, look, I woke up this morning and I saw the scenes that I saw. I could not believe. It was horrific. And you thought, in a world where you want to work together to promote humanity, how could one human being do this to another human being? And especially when they're out there either going to a mosque or at a mosque, or it's just like going to a church or going to a temple or going to a synagogue. But here it was a specific act targeted against the Muslim community based on their faith. And it was sheer disbelief. And you try to understand the logic, but there is no logic when you're dealing with evil. And that's why for me, as they say, coming from a Muslim background, my father was an imam, whenever you see somebody who loses their life, you say the verse from the Quran, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, which means to God we belong and to God we return. And you say that about anyone who loses their life in whatever circumstances. So today is one of those days where, from what you've seen from individuals from all faith and none come together to say these kind of acts will unite us rather than divide us.
We live in an era, though, as we were just hearing, where some of these ideas are certainly fermented online by social media platforms, and in this case, the depravity was shared online.
Well, look, I think what we have to do is, for me, it's the evidence we took from the Chief of Counter-Terrorism, Mr. Basu, on the Home Affairs Select Committee. He said in the last quarter, this is 2018, 1.9 million pieces of extremist ideology was taken down by Twitter. And what that shows to me, there is a real issue with regards to how these individuals are radicalized. And this is not just an issue that we're going to face in New Zealand. We're now seeing the links in the Western world with far-right extremism. We saw it in Norway in 2011, where innocent children lost their lives to an evil act. We're seeing it in New Zealand now. We saw it in England before, in the United Kingdom. We saw my brilliant colleague Joe Cox, who lost her life to far-right extremism. And one thing we have to address is, how do these individuals get sucked in? And it's online radicalization, extremism, sharing information and ideology between one another.
So we've heard that the Home Secretary wants the social media companies to do far more. But how can they cope with the level of material, the amount of material that, as you've just identified, is readily available?
I think there's two things you have to look at. The government have already set up the Counter-Extremism Internet Referral Unit. I think that's very good. But the problem that you have is, how do you stop non-violent extremist material going on Facebook, going on Instagram, going on Twitter, before it reaches the criminal threshold? That kind of material, we saw that vile material used by individuals like Anjuman Chowdhury, vile extremists inspired by Daesh al-Qaeda. We saw it with another far-right extremism, Tommy Robinson. His material led to the terrorist attack in Finsbury Park, the Osborne case. So what we now have is, how do you get these social media companies? Because they'll all probably say, we have a code. Yes, but what are you doing to ensure that that material doesn't go on that in the first place, and ensure that these individuals are kept off that?
But even if they're trying 24 hours a day to take this material down, how do they keep pace with it? And that's before we even start talking about the dark web.
Well, I think what we have is, when you talk about the dark web, you've got to look at two things here. 4chan, 8chan is where this individual who posted his extremist ideology, and they shared material on that. So the real issue is, when we live in an interconnected world, I know the previous Home Secretary, Amber Rudd, was in the United States working with them to ensure that we can get this kind of material before it comes on to the internet. And one thing that is, internet providers at the moment use they don't use the eye, they use artificial intelligence and other means. And that's what we have to be greater at. And also, not just the internet, I think in society overall, the government's put up prevent and channel. And what we now have to do, everyone has a responsibility at every level. Whenever you see something which you think could incite hatred, then we have to challenge it, counter it at every level.
How far should regulation go? Because of course then you get into the territory of what's freedom of speech. You don't want to clamp down on that, but then at the same time you don't want to give oxygen to extremism.
Well, look, the first thing I would say is the first duty of the state is to protect your citizens. And now we have, quite clearly seen here that the threat is maintained by individuals who are being sucked in to extremism, whether it's Daesh inspired, whether it's Al-Qaeda inspired, or it's far-right extremism.